I think there's a bigger danger in folks overreacting than there is in a potential problem itself.
The dire Y2K predictions aren't tough to find. Just get in front of that computer, the very device behind this whole idea mess, and click around the elements of launch into darkness, societal collapse, World War III.
What will be a broad and concerted campaign. More than 35 countries are giving crucial support, from the use of naval and air bases to help with intelligence and logistics to the deployment of combat units. Every nation in this coalition has chosen to bear the duty and share the honor of serving in our common defense.
Hey, so I understand that they give you now 60 instead of 20. Is that true?
Peace of the troubled world and the hopes of your prosperity.
Well, we've got one.
One minute till the store opens. Okay, number one thing you
Is the satellite
We're going in, the first batch of customers. First unit. Hi. Let's see the wings. Don't worry, I'm not going to mug you.
Happy New Year, mate.
Happy New Year. Happy quarter of a century over.
I know, it's mental, isn't it?
Yep.
Considering that's been, I guess, you and me, our generation, that's most of our life has been in that quarter of a century, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're born in the 90s, you were kind of a kid for that last end of the 20th century period. So you don't really remember much from it. Mainly it's the 21st century. And I feel like 21st century, everything got crazy anyway. Like the 90s was all boring. Not kind of culturally, it was interesting in some ways, kind of musically and cinematically, but like kind of generally politically, it was kind of boring. And then 21st century kicks off and it's all fucking crisis after crisis after crisis.
Do you think the kids born in the 1890s felt the same way?
Well, let me think. Yeah, well, maybe because World War One happened in like what, 1916 or so. So
right, and then people are just driving around in cars all of a sudden.
Yeah,
acceleration really takes off.
Yeah, I mean, they had an acceleration of industrial technology, where we have an acceleration of digital technology.
Right, exactly. Because I guess, I mean, you'll know the most about this, I guess, because we'll get onto this because your latest book is related to this. But I guess, yeah, that's kind of the tail end of the industrial age, right? And then we're kind of in the thick of the information age, right?
Yeah. We're in exactly. We're in the information. I was like your intro kind of put it well, because it was kind of like George Bush kind of resembling kind of stupid bad politics, like kind of the kind of boomer idiocy regime, and is fucking up the world relentlessly without hesitation. And then at the same time, Steve Jobs like inventing the iPhone. So
okay, I'm glad you picked out. I wanted to know actually what did you pick out from that intro? So yeah, you got George Bush being Bush, and then you've got Steve Jobs presenting the iPhone. What else did you actually catch?
Bush, Jobs. I was sort of really focused on Bush because I haven't seen Bush in a long time. I was kind of nostalgic about Bush. That
was a really weird thing for me, researching for the intro and looking it up and being like, oh yeah, the Iraq War was then, wasn't it? My brain told me that it was in the 90s or the 80s or something, but no, it was this century.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bush, Jobs. What else was in that intro? I can't even remember now.
A very important thing on 11th of September was in a couple of them.
Oh, 9/11. Yeah.
Kind of related to Bush, I suppose.
A lot of the footage was kind of early 2000s. You know, I kind of felt like I was suddenly back in like
actually. Well, this is
2005.
something I realized as well doing that is a lot of that early 2000s aesthetic sort of bled into later clips as well. Like they still looked like that time period. And actually, if you look at clips from early 2010s, especially some news broadcasts, they look so much older than just 10 years old.
Okay,
like some of that was like Occupy Wall Street and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, Occupy Wall Street, yeah.
And Obama was in there as well, and it looked way older than you'd imagine.
It was really like 2015, and this is a point I wanted to bring up at some point because I feel like the 21st century has all really been important, but I feel like 2015 onwards, like everything kind of got crazy, like everything changed a lot. Because I think that's when the iPhone came out, you know, and that's when
2015.
Yeah, wasn't it 2014, 2015?
No way. iPhone was like 2008.
Yeah, I know, but like not everyone was using a smartphone.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'd say around that time was when it
around that time, like as everyone started using smartphones, and just the whole digital, and the whole like kind of tech thing, like all the like Facebook and Twitter and all these companies, you know, kind of blew up in that time. They were around before, they were around longer, but they weren't really like the tech feudal lords that they are now.
Well, I would agree. So this, I mean, maybe this is a good time to talk about, rather than what you just picked out from the intro, what from your perspective are the most important events of that time period? Because for me, when I was thinking about this, and I think that my perspective comes from the fact that I probably have a tech background, but I think the most important events for me are like the ubiquity of certain technologies. So like you said, the basically broadband, like a reliable internet becoming a thing all the time. And then obviously attached onto that, you have mobile internet and Wi-Fi. That's probably the biggest thing that's happened the last quarter century, which is interesting because the internet is obviously an older invention than that. But I think the fact that it became ubiquitous and available to everyone across the globe pretty much is a way bigger event. And I suppose I would say on the secondary to that is the fact that the proliferation of the iPhone or similar smartphones and sort of app structures that come along with that. That seems to be one of the most important events of the last quarter century, because those have had profound impacts on, like, from a philosophical perspective, on the way we ontologically like see the world.
Yeah. Really,
like it's weird. I was thinking about this recently, how we refer to the internet as if it's an entity, but it's really not an entity. It's just all the layers on top of it: internet, smartphones, computers, and apps. They're hollow facilitators for human communication. But the best way to practically think about it is as if it is an entity, because that's what it's become, you know. And I also thought the other biggest event that's happened in the last quarter century would probably be COVID, but I'm slightly worried that I'm affected by recency bias, because that's a fairly recent event. Because a lot of people will be like, oh, it's got to be the Ukraine war or whatever, but then you forget that the Iraq war happened, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think they're all important. I think it's like Iraq war, well, 9/11 and Iraq war, then the 2008 crash, right? And then the whole digital explosion of digital infrastructure, and then COVID, and then the Russia-Ukraine thing as well. I mean, they're all. I mean, that kind of just covers everything, right? Economics, geopolitics, and technology. Right?
I think it's asking what is the most important. Important's a slippery word. It's kind of like
it's difficult.
Saying I kind of hate it for the same reason I hate people who say better, like, because there's nothing that's actually better. It's just substantively, like, something's higher in some substantive way you can describe it. It's not, like, better, just generally better doesn't, like, it's a sticky philosophical issue. But like I suppose what's kind of confusing but interesting is, like the Vietnam War, the Iraq War is not like the most maybe geopolitically important war, but they're culturally very important wars for the West.
Yeah, exactly. Like they sort of, I think, it kind of spells out the end of liberal hegemony, kind of global liberal hegemony. Because it was really a kind of desperate attempt to, like, if you watch those Adam Curtis documentaries and you see the aftermath of the Afghan war, and it's like you got like some social worker trying to educate like Afghan women into like contemporary art, and they're just like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, it's incredible because it's just like, the early, like, Bush sort of, did that war announcing this big explosion of like liberal freedoms across the world, and then what you actually get with that is like Duchamp presentations about Duchamp's toilet exhibition. And I think people in the West themselves gradually came to understand those Afghan women getting re-educated into Duchamp, because it's like, all the like the HR kind of hyper liberal HR re-educations that went on with all the wokeness, and it's like the kind of absurd clown world stage of liberalism, so it's like the whole 21st century was clown world of liberalism, which probably means that it's dying kind of death pangs, although what I mean by that is like global liberalism. I don't necessarily mean liberalism as like a kind of political ideology.
Well, no, let's call it what it is. It's the system of American hegemony. Let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly. But that does have a certain specific ideological character to it as well.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. Which was
not merely
the most recent version of that's still instituted, but it was instituted in the 20th century. But I think it's very clear, and I think you would agree that the 21st century so far has been that system failing to work, because it failed to work in the Middle East. It's failed to work in Ukraine, because it's still trying to do things the same way as it did them in the 20th century, and it's just simply not working. And some people will be very well. It's clear from the way the legacy media colors the events of these things that some people will see it as very fortunate and liberating that this hegemony is finally coming to an end, and some people will find it very scary that this is not working anymore.
Yeah, it's both. I mean, the answer actually is both. Like it is worrying, and it is also good, because I mean, like, it's good in the sense that like it really has exhausted its benefit and value, to the world. It doesn't really have anything good to offer. It doesn't say like some liberal like legal structures that go back 200 300 years shouldn't be kept or something. There's like structural things about liberalism which are beneficial and good. Not all of them, of course, but certain things. And at the same time, there's just lots of, I think, like, there's the kind of structural liberalism, and I feel like there's the kind of imaginary liberalism, if you get me. Like the imaginary of us all equal and free and personally liberated. And, indefinite economic growth, technology is just going to make everything better. That kind of imaginary, I feel like yes, structured liberalism is still very much around, and it probably still has its benefits, but like the imaginary is now a bit of a nightmare.
But it doesn't correlate to the reality anymore. And I think a lot of the, at least in the intellectual world, a lot of the heavy lifting to keep that house of cards aloft these days is done by some of the people we talked about in the last episode.
Remind me, what was that again? Last episode?
We're talking about podcast people.
Oh yeah. Sorry, podcast people. Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of kind of cognitive work going into kind of sustaining this model. Well, not this model, but even the imaginaries, like sustaining the imaginary of the kind of future of liberalism. And like that's where the tech feudal lords are interesting, because they sort of try to do that a little bit. Like they do challenge like some of the kind of cultural norms, or like progressive cultural norms, obviously. And they do kind of, I think, want to revert back to like like a kind of pre-woke version of liberalism, or maybe even to some pre-60s liberalism. Probably that's a bit too far. Like I don't really see Musk or all these people as
definitely
like
not. No, definitely not pre-civil
yeah.
rights. 100% not.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, the whole recent thing with the visas, that proves that. But it kind of like, pre-woke liberalism, but they want to sustain this sort of imaginary of at least this kind of modernity of like nonstop innovation, nonstop progress, nonstop technological acceleration, and so forth. Like I feel like Len Friedman and Elon's Musk and all these characters are very much in that camp, which is probably a result of the kind of because like the people that want to really challenge the imaginary of liberalism, I think are normally quite radical in their thinking. Most of the mainstream
necessarily.
actors don't.
I think that's probably
Yeah.
the most radical position you can have today.
Yeah. Left or right, I think like the main thing that makes you radical is like that,
Well, that's actually the thing that retards when we say left or right, because a lot of people on the supposed left and supposed right are actually just at base they're liberals. Like the supposed far left, like Ocasio-Cortez, right?
Yeah.
At base, she's a liberal and she supports everything past the 1960s. And once again, on the supposed far right, Donald Trump and Elon Musk, they are at base liberals who support the same thing. Which is why, we have that situation where people vote for a different side, and they're like, "Oh, why are we still getting the same result?" Oh, because it doesn't matter if you put on a red cap and trigger some libs, you're still a lib.
Yeah. They still want their cheap visas.
Yeah, and I want my kebab at 3 a.m, delivered by an immigrant on a bike.
On a bike, yeah, exactly. That's what they want. Yeah.
Anyway, we need to be talking about the 21st century. I always get back to immigration, don't I?
Well, I mean, immigration is one of the big factors of the 21st century. Like if you look at the demographic statistics of like all Western nations
right.
in 1999 and 2019, it's just like incomparable. So that's a big factor.
I'd have to look at the numbers on this, but I would probably predict there's more immigration to the West has happened in the last 25 years than had happened any time before that, including white immigration. Because I know that they did this during Biden's administration. Like there was more immigration to the US than there was in the entire like Ellis Island period, So it's pretty unprecedented.
It is unprecedented. Yeah, it is. And there's a quote by Peter Sloterdijk. When he was asked what's causing populism, he said that it's basically he's got very interesting paradigms to think about these things, but he says the thing that like immigration and digital technology have in common, which is making like kind of like 20th century liberalism impossible, is that they sort of make us feel like our space is being encroached the whole time. So like constant communication, you feel like, for example, like your boss texts you after work or something, and you're like, for fuck's sake, like I used to leave the office and that was it, over till tomorrow. He cannot annoy me. But now it's like, you can, or family or friends, whoever, they can annoy you the whole time. And then or social media, although social media is kind of your fault if you go on it, but nonetheless, social media people can sort of like vex you the whole time. They can, you're reading bullshit in there and whatever. And then like mass immigration, it's just people just feel like their space is just being encroached. There's no boundaries anymore. And he says that you need boundaries for a liberal character. Like liberal characters emerge in wealthier nations where they have space. They're not living in these kind of ghettoized cities. It's like wealthy cities, more affluence, more space, more borders, strong national borders. That came about with liberalism. Because actually Europe before before the nation state was actually a bit more fluid. It's a bit more like it is today. The people moved around more. It was like national boundaries and structures were a bit less enforced. And then the nation state emerged, and you have strong national borders. You have an increase in wealth, and that kind of feeling of distance and boundary in space allowed for a liberal character to take hold. Now that space is being destroyed, and you're going to get a reduction of that liberal character, which is exactly what's happening. I think that's a very good paradigm to think about it with, and I think that definitely 21st century is like a big destruction of those boundaries. Digital communication, immigration, even things like pandemics. The virus is getting in, or terrorism. It's like some fucking crazy person from Syria is suddenly in my Christmas market trying to stab me or something. It's like it's constant encroachment of that feeling of space.
Yeah, I don't disagree. One important thing to note about the I guess the encroachment thing, but also the ability to have more flexible borders, is that previous version of Europe was full of all European people who largely subscribe to the same system of values as well, which was pretty important to make that work, basically. And now there's no like shared metaphysical reality at any level. There's no intellectual shared metaphysics. There's no religious shared metaphysics. There's no political shared metaphysics. It's all up in the air. And so you're literally dealing with unpredictable entities. And it's weird because I used to think, I'd say like 10 years ago, especially when I go back out to the countryside in England, I would often think, I'd be like, if I'm on my phone, I'd see like, oh, this has happened in London or whatever. I'd often think, well, if I just switched off my phone now and stayed here in the Shire, like you wouldn't know that anything was changing because you didn't have your phone to look at the internet, right? But now you go back to those places and those entities are there in physical space now. So it's really unavoidable, even for people who don't have any technology or connection to the internet. It's unavoidable. And I don't know, this is what I wonder, because I mean, say what you want about the man, but Douglas Murray's book, The Strange Death of Europe, is a really good read. Definitely, it's quite outdated politically now, I guess. Things have moved on a lot in such a short time, but it's a great book for lots of reasons. But I think what stuck with me the most was the final chapter, because he brings up the fact that this whole situation might not come to a Hitlerian head like some liberals are worried it might. It might just, like, Western civilization, and he kind of argues that Christian morality and those sorts of things, it might just die with a whimper. This might just be there might just be a fizzle at the end, and that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know what's worse. What's worse? Do we want to go back to the 1930s, or do we want a fizzle? I don't know what we want.
Yeah. I don't think either, though. I personally don't think either of those things will happen. I think they'll actually be like kind of halfway between both. Maybe not even halfway. Maybe like a third of the way. Like a third of the way towards like a third way. Like well, like like not like I'm not saying there's going to be anything near like Europe in the early 20th century, but it could be like, but it's certainly not going to be Europe in the late 20th century either, because that's so liberal and blah blah blah. It's going to be something a bit different. I think it's going to be something kind of maybe not halfway, but at least a third in between those 2 points. I don't see like the liberal character in the way it is in the 20th century, late 20th century, persisting for much longer at all. Especially when the boomer generation are gone. I just can't see that persisting. And then with the influx of immigrants too, like the immigrants aren't fucking all liberals. Like they're not all from liberal minded countries. Like they're not, and then actually it's an interesting point that this guy, definitely worth reading his book. His name's Olivier Roy. He's a French writer, and he writes about he was actually an expert on Islamic civilization, and he he talks a lot about current events and stuff. And he was saying that like one of the things that people on the right don't understand is that the presence of Islam in Europe is not necessarily in contest with Christianity. What's actually in contest is religiosity versus secularism as a whole. That's the contest. And he gives an example, like for example of kind of, I think it's early like 2005 or something, like in France, where these two girls from I think a Sikh background or something like that came into school with the big head, hijabs or something like that, one of these religious headwear, and the school was like, you can't wear that here, and there was a big it was in the media, and there was a big kind of public dispute about it. And the result of that apparently eventually was that like the state basically sort of said, all right, no religious because I think what happened was there was a certain kind of like, Christian versus Muslim conflict, but what actually the result of it was the state just said no religious dress or no religious symbols in the public space, right? At all. So the result was just secularism won and any religiosity. So he argues that as immigration continues and as we get like less liberal, it's not necessarily true that all the kind of Christians are going to suffer. Like their sort of tide rises with religiosity. It's like, so people on the right tend to think, oh my God, we're going to live under Sharia law like in 50 years. And he says that's bullshit, because religiosity will rise and therefore Christianity will rise. He actually predicts Christianity might actually increase a lot. So there's all these kind of weird, interesting dynamics going on. And like, I don't really have as much of a pessimistic outlook as some people on the right do. I think that things are a bit more complicated. But basically the point is, I don't see secularism and like post-war liberalism persisting for much longer. That's basically my take in short terms.
I think, I mean, especially in the case of Europe, though, you have to keep in mind, because I was in France, right?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. You have to keep in mind the fact that France is de jure and de facto a secular state, which is why you do have debates over like completely banning stuff of a religious nature there. Whereas in other European countries, you could say the UK, because the head of state is still the head of the Church of England, and public spaces do have Christian symbols in them as sanctioned by the government quite often. Or you could go even further, where you have a country like Italy, where it's for obvious reasons quite overtly Catholic, for example. But I do think you're right, and actually I think this is something that works really well for containment of any actual radical rightism, which would leverage any sort of Christian rebirth, or actually stand with maybe a more Islamic sort of movement. Is that it's a very containment right idea that Christianity is again at odds with Islam.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. I think it's missing the mark completely. There is a kind of, I feel like there is a potential upsurge in Christianity in the West in the next few decades. I think there is a lot of younger men.
I will possibly. I also think there is going to be an upsurge, but it's going to be mostly African immigrants who are already Christian.
Yeah. But you do see also like it is perhaps this is more of a craze in America than it is in Europe, but Orthodox Christianity being taken up as a
I think that you spend too much time on social media if you think that's a real thing.
Fair. Yeah, I know, but I know it's not very like widespread, but it's just interesting to me. I'll just say this, right? Like when I was a teenager, that would be absurd. It would be absurd to see in any Western society any group of young men being interested in like Orthodox Christianity as like unless their fucking parents pushed it on them. Like you're talking about instances of like Western men from like, basically secularized homes. Maybe they're registered Catholics or something, but they're not practicing. Kind of develop an enthusiastic intrigue in some sort of Orthodox Christianity, like Russell Brand, for example. Russell Brand is completely Catholic now. I mean, it is interesting. Like, it's not widespread. Like, it's not going to like change the political.
No, I need to see it in some census data to actually like believe. I think so. Here's what I think. Right, I think that disaffected young men who have gone for religion has always been a thing, and it's just now like a public thing you do on the internet. I think this has always happened. If I saw like considerable census data that said the same thing, then I would be like, okay, fine, there is something weird going on here. But
well, I would think like in the 80s and 90s, disaffected young men from the West probably would be more likely to go for some sort of subculture. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was secularized subculture. There is like, the interesting thing is that like it's possible that something like more kind of a bit more like Catholicism, but like with a bit of the older kind of ideas around Catholicism, a bit more hard Catholicism or like Orthodoxy could become a kind of subcultural phenomenon. I find that's interesting to me,
because you can't really be like, because it would have been countercultural to be a punk at one point, but everything in punk's just completely subsumed by the, well, I guess artsy wokeism, right? Is all just all punk bands are like anti-Trump and whatever, and it's like, okay, cool, that's like totally establishment, not punk at all, but fine. So I guess there's no real like cultural thing you can do that isn't rightist in some way. That's counter. I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
Like even joining the Communist Party isn't really like.
Yeah, no, it's not anymore. Yeah,
kind of. It's not exactly sanctioned, but you know what I mean. Like it's
everything.
Anything traditionally left wing that's actually genuinely countercultural now.
Yeah. I could barely even think. Yeah, like
that's what that Paul Joseph Watson said a long time ago. That conservatism is the new counterculture. And it's kind of right.
Yeah, there's a truth to it. Yeah, I mean,
I would think everything countercultural and actually offensive to people is rightist in some
on
way.
The right end of the spectrum. Yeah, 100%. I think I think there's certain ideas around. I think there are certain older kind of Marxist or socialist ideas which are still subversive, but they normally are only subversive today when you sort of blend them with some sort of social conservatism. That's the only time.
You could be like an old school Stalinist, maybe. That would be kind of edgy.
Well, I'll give you an example, but like Academic Agent made a video like last week about this whole HB1 visa thing in America, and he was quoting Lenin. He was quoting Lenin because Lenin was talking about like the imperialism of the capitalists and how they'll use cheap labor from abroad to like undermine the local workers and all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting, like like there are certain moments where you do see a blending of old school socialism and Marxism with kind of contemporary forms of conservatism. But generally speaking, though, I think I agree with you that like there's nothing particularly subversive about anything like punk rock or even like joining a kind of Marxist or communist political party or anything like that. It's all been hollowed out. And I actually think the most subversive thing you can do today is like go to mass. And that's crazy. Like that's crazy to me. And actually, just to give you an anecdote, like because I occasionally go to mass. I'm not a big mass goer, but I like it's like once every, I don't know, 3 months or something. But I went to mass when I was in Germany once, right? And I was expecting it like to be like here, where it's mainly old people. And I swear to fucking God, and that, take in mind this was an English-speaking mass, and perhaps it was kind of foreign students or something maybe that were there. So, but there was lots of young people, lots of couples. Like couples, like attractive couples, like young, attractive couples who are almost kind of cozying up to each other in the mass. Couldn't fucking believe it. I was like, where did you go? And then after the mass, I only went once, like, right, because I was only in Germany for like 4 months, so I only went once. But and the English speaking mass was only on once a month. but after the mass, the priest said, "Oh yeah, on Tuesday night or something, we're having a little social event, you know, whatever." Well, you know, it wasn't like it wasn't like you know a specifically religious thing, like, oh, we're doing this liturgy or we're doing so, you know, it was just like, oh, we're having a social event for international people, you know. So if you want to come along, I didn't go, but like, I was wondering, and I was like, did those couples meet at this event? You know, like, because that's interesting thing about religion is like, because it's just fucking impossible to actually like, okay, subcultures or generally cultures in general should help people escape a predominant, well, subcultures should help people escape a predominant culture, which is bad in some way, right? Or cultures in general should help people socially function, for example, like meet a partner, right? And I'm thinking like all the kind of secular world is really bad at that today. Like they're really bad at functioning for the most basic things, like dating apps, or you know, people don't meet at work anymore because they're afraid to be fucking accused of sexual harassment or something. So like weirdly enough, like places that used to be the least subversive and the most like traditional are becoming potentially like subversive places to kind of get around the limitations of the kind of mainstream secular society.
Yeah.
And if I was running the church, that's where I would go for it. I'd be like, that's it. We're the new subculture. We're gonna fucking help young people meet each other. We're gonna like, you know, let men be men. No more fucking, you know, trying to feminize
I
men.
like the idea. What you could do is you could do very similar adverts to the Tinder adverts, but they're advertising church.
Yes.
So
And you
could
have a
also
quote
apply right at a
Bible,
church
you know?
social event if you want.
Yeah,
You're probably not going to get some mentally unstable woman with a nose ring.
yeah, you'll be like a normal chick.
You
Yeah.
might meet a normal girl.
No hair dye and nose rings here.
Yeah.
Thank you very
No
much.
surprises downstairs. But this is kind of why, like, I think we really are at the tail end of anything approximating the neoliberal system of the last century, because now it truly it does not offer anything millennial or younger anything. It doesn't offer them anything. Like, it doesn't offer white men anything to keep things running because you're evil and there's no one to meet there at any of its things. There's no nice people to meet. It doesn't even offer young women anything anymore because they're no longer at the bottom of the victim hierarchy. And then now it doesn't even really offer minorities anything, because all it has for them now is H-1B visas, which is basically indentured servitude. And it doesn't even give them DEI hiring now because the woke's been put away, right? So
yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, like secular liberal society really doesn't offer many people. It offers a way for, I think, the older, affluenter generation to kind of monopolize assets, and it offers a way for, like, you know, global corporations to like profit, and it offers a way to launder your money if you're very rich. You know what I mean? But it doesn't really offer like most people anything, you know.
no.
Especially the young, and that's the interesting thing is especially the younger generations. Like, it doesn't offer them anything, and I think that's why potentially we could be entering into a period where some more interesting and unusual and unpredictable things could happen, because it's like I feel like if some sort of movement or some sort of institution just filled in that void, like it would just take off. Like it would be like a fucking, I don't know what, like a fucking Pope Urban II calling for the crusade or something. It would just be like this, you know, insane thing that would just change everything. Like because there really is nothing there, you know.
I think that most change is going to happen very, 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 very slowly, then all at once. You know, that's kind of what happened with the collapse of the Roman Empire, really. Yeah. So I think to take a real, you know, that's a similar kind of empire on a historical scale, I think we do have a couple hundred years left of a decline and a kind of slow petering out, and then possibly a very sudden collapse. And then in 1,000 years, people will be wondering what we use these glass rectangles for.
These glass rectangles. These ruined everything. They fucking ruined everything. I'm a little bit less pessimistic, actually. Like, I don't really think that the Roman Empire analogy totally works. I do think with America in particular, there are some serious connections. But generally speaking, though, I'm kind of a little bit suspicious that even you can bulk in the West in this one big thing. It seems to me the West is actually much more divided than there's Europe and there's America, and even in America, there's the kind of red states versus the blue states, and and I don't know. I'm a little bit less like that sort of view of history. I know that the kind of cyclical view of history has become more popular again, and like I like the cyclical view of history in the way that it challenges the completely linear view, which is everything's going to get more progressive, blah blah blah. But I don't like the secular view of history in the sense that it's almost a bit too deterministic for me. I like that sort of openness. I think history is actually a bit more unpredictable and open than most people assume. There is a tendency in the 21st century as well to be a bit fatalistic. And I'm not saying there's not reasons to be like cautious or skeptical, but like a bit fatalistic, like climate change is good. The left thinks climate change is going to destroy the planet. The right thinks we're all going to be run by Sharia law in 20 years. And I don't know. I just kind of think most of this stuff is a bit of an emotional response, perhaps a justified one, because there's nothing to sort of give us a vision of the future anymore. So we come up with visions of kind of apocalypse instead. And like, I'm not saying that like, those apocalyptic visions aren't based on some like real problems. I'm just saying that like I think there's a bit of a jump that people go to from that generalized emotional disposition of kind of there's nothing to look forward to oh my god, we're all going to be like living in the massive flood. The end of the world is the end is nigh.
I would yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think it's not exactly like the Roman Empire, but even the way you're describing the fact that Europe might have its own thing going on, and then there might be a civil war in the US, is almost giving me like a East and West Empire thing. Like the empire, the European Empire is going to have Brussels as the capital, like Byzantium, and then there's going to be like the Western Empire, which has maybe like the American South, which survived the nuclear war or something. I don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah,
but I do think that one thing that people often assume is that we've got so much technology now, there is no way we will decline. And I'm sure the Romans felt very similarly, where they're like, we've got running water in the cities, clean running water in the cities. There is no way this is going to go away at any point. But the one thing that I think, we do have amazing technology, right? We have, like, you know all about this because of your book, drone technology and all that sort of stuff. But what people forget is you still need competence from the average man to make all that stuff work for consistently work over a long period of time. And I think, we're already seeing it in, people argue this is why airlines are going to shit right now, where there's so many more accidents, why things are always late, why things aren't turning up on time, is because you've got enough unqualified hires in the airline industry where that's actually starting to become a problem. And okay, that sounds like one very small thing. Okay, some people are late on one airline flight, doesn't really matter, right? But the problem with that is we've got such a complex system where things are so in terms of time and space, so they're so intrinsically connected. That's one of the great powers, but also the great weaknesses of globalism is, okay, these planes have some passengers going on their holidays on them, but they also have parts for those drones that if they don't get to one place on time, it not only holds back the production of drones, but then has a knock-on effect on everything else. And I think people don't realize how loosely our amazing global system is actually held together. I think it's actually a lot weaker than we think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like there's lots of there's even recent examples of like like the housing crisis is a really good example of like how can a society be so advanced in so many ways but be so incompetent in like one of the most basic areas, which is like providing housing for people. Like it's just Ireland's particularly bad in this regard. Like, and
Yeah.
when COVID happened, it was like, oh, well, the materials we need for building are like from this country and this country and this country, and like the sort of the way we transport those materials has been delayed because of COVID, and also all the regulations around work and stuff because of COVID was like stopping people just getting together and building. So it's like the most basic function just couldn't go, like, and it wasn't just because of COVID. Even before that there was a problem,
Well, but this is why I think you're correct in saying that these sorts of things, at least for this system, if there isn't some sort of apocalyptic event, which I don't think that, because there often really isn't unless you live at the foot of Mount Vesuvius or something like this.
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, overnight the empire's going to collapse and we're all going to be cavemen again. But I do think that there's, okay, here's a good example. Okay, so Flint, Michigan. Have you heard of Flint, Michigan before?
Yeah. The place with the water
they had clean water in the 20th century, and they had enough like incompetent officials elected that there was pollution in the river, and okay, there's poison in the water. Don't drink the water. Have bottled water instead. We'll fix it at some point. They've had decades and decades and decades, and it still hasn't been fixed. If there's enough like incompetence and people not caring and not enough actual wealth in the government, for example, what if there's just like, I don't know, the River Thames just becomes poisoned in some way, or the water source for London just becomes poisoned, and then the government says, okay, just drink bottled water for now, we'll sort it out, and they just don't fix it. That could happen for a lot of things. Like, okay, all the villages, something went wrong with the telephone mast, now they don't get phone signal. What if there just isn't the will or the competence to like fix that? That's what I think might happen very, very slow. Because these things don't, like, telephone wires don't last forever. They have to be maintained. Like wind turbines and energy plants, they have to be maintained by people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that might stop happening in the next 100 years or so.
Yeah, like I even to use the Ireland example again is like the government are just so full of people that are, well, they're kind of gerontocratic, even if they're not all old, they're just gerontocratic in their character, all of them, and I don't know I don't know the exact number, but like a third of them or half of them are landlords. So it's like they just don't like they just don't care. They just don't care that like young people can't live in the country, and it's not technical incompetence. It's not necessarily a problem of overregulation, like in terms of bureaucratic rules and stuff, because that could be fixed easily. It's literally just like they don't fucking care. Like you just have a ruling class that just has sort of insulated itself from the problems of its own society.
There's a very fine line between incompetence and evil, but sometimes people cross that line.
Yeah, but like
at the same time,
Yeah, but like I'm saying, like once I think part of the problem here is that like a ruling class has basically insulated itself from the problem, right? So it's like their kids can still live where they want because maybe their kids are could find a good paying job in Dublin.
And if the water was poisoned in their neighborhood, then that would be like number one priority to fix, and they would get it fixed. It's just again, I hate using this comparison because I do agree with you the fact it's not a fair comparison, but like all the warlords and senators were definitely insulated from the fall of Rome for most of it.
A lot of them were killed, though. I think, I think like you're probably right, but I think today it's much worse. Like the insulation of the elites is really, really, really like, because at least in Rome you had to deal with like really ambitious men who like would use violence. So like you have to be careful. So like if you're like if you're a fucking oligarch today in Western society, not even Western society, could be in as well in other countries, you don't even have to worry about like a kind of Game of Thronesy level violence being thrown onto you for various reasons. Like you could just basically get wealthy, be comfortable, avoid the the negative pathologies of the decline, and just, you know, you don't really even have to deal with like threats from your own class, because your own class are not fucking ambitious enough even to kind of step on your toes, if you get me. That's one of the reasons Elon Musk is so annoying to a lot of these kind of 20th century kind of technocrats and kind of gerontocratic elites, is because it's like, oh, why don't you just, you're rich, why don't you just, like, you know, live on a yacht and like be comfortable, and like, you know, just, you know, why do you have to go tweeting things about stuff? I don't agree with Elon Musk tweets most of the time. I think he's actually not well read and not very thoughtful, and he talks about places he doesn't understand. All that, yeah, but like, I at least like the fact that he's like at least sort of like ambitious or provocative enough to like stir the pot a little bit, you know. It's like these other elites are just like, they're so sterile and lifeless that they just, you know, like their entire life is a kind of retirement plan. Their entire life is just like a kind of cozy, comfortable, safe, insulated sort of thing. And Musk will at least like invest his money in like in like a kind of bad, risky investment like Twitter, or he'll like piss off a government somewhere or something, you know. And I think that's like, you know, and I think like that's one of the problems too, is that these elites that we're used to, they just don't even have other elites that are just ambitious enough to even step on their toes. So they're so insulated from everything, you know.
Yeah, it's possible. It's a possibility, and I guess technology is one of the things that has made them so insulated. But it could also be the thing which makes them vulnerable. I mean, look at this. You know, the United Healthcare CEO that was shot by that guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he was probably able to. I mean, depends who you think was behind that. I don't know. Maybe other elites were behind that as well. I don't know. But let's say, I'm not going to name any specific politicians because I'll get arrested. Let's say you could find where most politicians live today because of the internet. If you really wanted to, you could find out an awful lot of information about a politician, and you could probably work out a pretty good plan to do something to them if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And most public figures probably.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Thanks to the internet.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, theoretically.
I even think the attitude towards that has changed a lot. I was over Christmas, like I was seeing some old friends, you know, from school that I haven't seen, that I only see like once or you know, maybe twice a year or something. And we were talking about this issue, and like, you know, I usually, speaking with people, I don't know their opinions on things anymore. I generally try to be as I generally try to be moderate in whatever I fucking say. But
yeah,
like,
you don't reveal your power level to the normies. Bad idea.
Yeah, I don't want to be like, I don't want to go schizo and reveal my true nature. But they were all like, "Oh yeah, fuck that CEO." You know what I mean? Like, "Oh yeah, haha." Right. And then other friends from London I was talking to over New Year's as well. I saw they were pretty much the same. "Oh yeah, fuck that CEO." Like,
right.
And I totally agree. Actually, like the motherfucker's company kills people. Insurance companies kill people on a regular basis. I totally agree with it. But I was just surprised at the kind of level of like disregard for like the fact that, you know, it's kind of vigilante justice. You know, people's attitudes are actually changing a little bit.
That is a 21st century, a late I guess 2020s phenomenon, because, you know, look at like, I don't know, JFK assassination, right? You would definitely have everyone in lockstep condemning it and saying how awful it is. But then you fast forward to something like the attempted Trump assassination, and you do have some dissonance on that issue. Like like obviously the side that is like, yay, go that guy, is deranged, as I think we might both agree. But there is some dissonance on that issue on whether violence can be justified, and that breaks out of the liberal paradigm that we've been talking about 100%.
Yeah, no, this is a really good point. And actually, I think one of the things that's caused this isn't even just ideology. It's literally just the capacity to sort of negotiate a problem has completely gone away. So, for example, it's like,
you have to go nuclear at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if there's no negotiating capacity, you're going to have to go to an extreme action. Like, even and like this is sort of drilled into us on a day-to-day basis today. It's like, even an example, right? When I bought my laptop last year, I was given a McAfee, whatever it's called, antivirus software with it, and I decided, and like I was like, is this
I
gonna
hope you
resubscribe?
freaking uninstalled that.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna do it now. Why? Because will it fucking anyway. The point is, it's coming up. It's coming up to the what would be the resubscription date, and I'm like, oh no, am I gonna get charged for another year fucking McAfee? Because it's crap anyway. Because it was like, I think they charged me like 15, 20 quid extra for the year, and I was like, yeah, go on, give it to me. But then I was like, I don't want to do another year. What'll be more expensive? So I'm like I'm trying to like cut my subscription on it, and like it won't work. And then I went on Reddit, and they were like, yeah, they just don't fucking let you. And like, what are you gonna do? We're gonna fucking like call McAfee up and be like, give me my fucking, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, he's dead. You know that he's dead, literally.
Oh yeah, he's dead.
Well,
Yeah,
like if he's actually dead, so you don't even have
that
anyone to
company is
assassinate
not being
anymore.
run anymore.
Who'd you assassinate, Owen?
Yeah. you motherfucking 50. You owe me 50 quid, motherfucker. Yeah,
Also,
like.
I mean, I'm a tech guy, but I'm hard judging you for having McAfee and ever having McAfee and having a subscription to McAfee.
Fucking Woodies.
Real hard judging.
Fucking Woodies, or being, what was it, Curry's, where I bought the laptop. They were
I
like,
mean, the fact that you buy a
have
laptop in Curry's anyway is pretty boomer. So
yeah. But like, anyway, the point is that like the capacity to like if you're a boomer or before that, if the local computer shop sold you something and you weren't happy with it, you go down to the local computer shop and you say, excuse me, sir, ma'am, am I going to be recharged for this next year? Oh, let me check. Yes or no. If yes, I don't want to. Okay, no worries. But in like tech world, I might have to like go to the fucking bank and go, yeah, will you like cancel this? Will you like block these McAfee motherfuckers from my thing so they can't charge me again? Like, I'm gonna have to go out of my way now to deal with this problem. There's no negotiating kind of point, and like that's one of the problems of today. Even just like technologically because of the internet, but also, for example, another friend of mine, he had about 4,000 euro or pounds lost because he had it on Revolut, and he was robbed in London. So some motherfucker robbed them, and then they took his Revolut money, and the amount of effort he said it was to get his money back, because your money's insured. It was awful. Now, if it was a local bank and it was his card that was taken or something, he could just go down to the local bank and sort that out. But there's no Revolut headquarters to go to, so he has to go through this painful process of filling out forms, contacting people, waiting for a reply, blah 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 blah. And it's just basically that the whole time. And then the political situation is the same, because it's just like, oh, we vote for this party, all the other parties are going to gang up and make sure they don't get in. Like you have a kind of rigged structure which basically stops negotiation happening the whole time. And the more people live in that society, the more they're going to think, fuck it, shoot them. Like, because there's no negotiation room, so why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just resort to something more extreme?
Yeah, but we're also like, I mean, no offense to your friends, but I think that this is the same for a lot of people, is that they just hear the word CEO and he got shot, and people are like, oh, fuck that guy. They don't really know the ins and outs of the United Healthcare like stuff.
Yeah.
They like, Team Bad is becoming anyone attached to the current system. And like very soon it's going to be, a politician was shot, and instead of having I don't know, the JFK response, or I can't remember who the Labour politician was who was stabbed about a decade ago, it's not going to be like vigils in the streets. It's going to be a general kind of, oh yeah, screw that person.
Yeah, true.
That's very, again, sorry to make the connection again, but that's very like late Roman Empire. Like, I don't know, get the next one in, next politician in.
Yeah, fair. No, like there are connections, obviously. But I do think you could even say that even from like a right wing perspective. Like, let's say a government got in and was like, okay, we're gonna like deport loads of people because we have taken too much people in. I can't imagine the right wing supporters would be like, all right, let's set up a kind of fair system where recent immigrants are like addressed for on some sort of standardized terms of like whether or not they're going to be chosen to leave or stay. I think the supporters would be just like, we don't trust any processes. We don't trust any sort of government processes.
Right.
Just
but
like,
ironically,
get rid of them all. Just get rid of them all. Like that's what's going to happen. Like,
to be frank with you, and maybe this is a very extreme right perspective, but it is true that if it was to be done in the reasonable way you're describing, it's very likely going to be completely ineffectual and actually become a means for containment, because it'll be a token thing where they take immigrants with criminal records and just do them, and it won't address the wider issue. To actually address the wider issue to the satisfaction of the rightist impulse, and frankly the ethnic rightist impulse, it would have to be totalitarian, I think.
Yeah, but
to actually satisfy that impulse, it would have to do that. So I think if that sort of thing does happen, this is very pessimistic of me to say. I shouldn't be saying this because I should be probably more optimistic. But I think if something under the name of deportation does start to happen in any meaningful way, it'll probably be in a containment way.
Yeah, but like what I'm saying is that like I think you would have to have a process. It would be impossible not to, but like people wouldn't trust the process. That's what I'm saying. Like they wouldn't trust it, even if the process actually was like done well, right? People wouldn't trust the process, and they would go, "No, we just want everyone to be gone." And then people might say, "Okay, but like then we're going to have a massive labor shortage in this regard, and we don't care." Like I'm not saying like I'm not taking a side here. I'm just saying like. You do need processes for things in society.
No, I'm saying that it would be a de jure process, kangaroo court style thing.
Yeah, but I'm saying like imagine
look like something.
Imagine it really was a genuine process, right? People just wouldn't trust it because they haven't seen a genuine process in like decades. So like if a genuine process comes around, people are going to go, I don't trust that anymore. You're not going to fool me. And like, even if it's a genuine process, and that's a huge problem, because like people just don't trust processes anymore. And to rebuild that trust would probably take decades, right?
Maybe.
So I don't know. Maybe not, because the media is quite powerful today. Maybe you could rebuild that trust very quickly. I don't know, but it's definitely a problem. I definitely think that the trust in process is like a huge deal today, which is going to push again things in a like less liberal direction, left and right probably, I would imagine. Well, the left's already gone in a completely fucking I suppose illiberal direction. So at least when it comes to process, not ideology. You know what I mean? Like cancel culture and stuff. I mean, it's like there's no process in cancel culture. It's just like, you said this, you're a fucking bigot. See ya.
Yeah, and you definitely have double standards in US legal process. Like the fact that people who went to Jan 6 are like held without trial for years and years as it stands.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal. And there's no BLM people who are still being held without trial, for example.
Oh yeah, it's all double standard.
So you're right in that regard. But I do think I wish we'd stop saying left and right, because I don't think it applies anymore. You just have dissident and non-dissident at this point. Like you're either on board with the neoliberal system or you're not, I think.
Yeah, like there's just one way thing I'm pointing to here. I would critique dissidents today a little bit on, which would be that like you do need, because like you don't have to be a fucking liberal to recognize that we need processes for certain things. And I just don't think anyone trusts processes anymore. And like I do think that actually is politically harmful, because it's like, okay, you want to implement this policy or achieve this goal, we're gonna need a process. We don't want a process, we just want it done now. And then it's like, well, it's not going to happen then, because then you're asking the authorities to just go completely totalitarian, and like the authorities most of the time won't do that. They don't want to do that. It's too risky, So It's like it kind of puts you in a position where you're never going to get what you want.
Yeah, I mean, let's not approach this with a lack of political imagination, though. Things could go totalitarian.
They could. Yeah, they could.
Just happen.
possible. It's
for
possible.
better or for worse, that could actually just happen. Because again, this is another thing that us living through the first quarter of the 21st century have to realize. We live in the exception to human history and human nature, not the norm.
Yeah.
We live in a huge exception. Not only do we live in an exception for the universe, because we live on this planet that's perfect conditions and life can live, but we also live in this tiny blip when there's been Homo sapiens on the planet, which is a tiny blip of the planet's life and a tiny blip of all of life's time period on the planet as well. And then within that, you have an even smaller blip where it's Western culture. And within that, you have an even smaller blip where it's this neoliberal system we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Looking at the bigger picture, things could. Don't think we should approach the future with a lack of imagination. That's for sure.
No, fair. Yeah. I think particularly since after World War II, I think this is to do with the kind of obliteration of history after World War II. It was like everything before World War II was barbaric, and everything after World War II was like great. That's the kind of boomer historical sensibility, you know. The kind of boomer regime, at least the boomer regime. It's not like all boomers, but the boomer regime, you know, the boomers onwards, X millennials, so forth. It's everyone thinks in that way today. They kind of think that like everything before World War II, like basically the Nuremberg trials, was like absolute barbarity and evil, and everything after that is good, even if it's bad in some ways. It's basically redemption, and that's obviously insane and stupid, but it leads to this kind of, I think, incapacity to realize what you're saying about like we live in a peculiar, like the way we live and think isn't the norm. If you took a macro historical perspective, you know, everything was a lot different for a lot longer, and in about 70 years, if we go from the end of World War II, for about 70 years or so, things got really, really peculiar. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be peculiar. I'm just saying that, like, you know, people really like to forget basically all of human history other than the past 70 years. They love to do that. And then they go, "You're weird because you think this way." It's like, well, you might be weird because you think in a line with the weirdness of the past 70 years, if you get me, right? So it's like, you're the weirdo. But yeah, anyway, most people don't get that.
No, I totally agree. So any big predictions for this year? I think the Ukraine war will probably fizzle out this year or next year.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, I always just have it in the back of my mind that like someone in NATO will just do something crazy, like they'll drop a nuke. I don't know. I just have this feeling that like NATO doesn't want to admit defeat there. It's really, really reluctant to admit defeat.
This is going to sound like maybe a stupid question, but like, what is NATO? And what I say is, I'm not asking for like a literal description of, what is NATO? I mean, like, okay, let's imagine that accidentally some American Red Cross people get shot by Russians. Like, is America going to have a global nuclear war because of that? Like, how far does it need to go before, like, I don't know, there's an article in NATO where if one country gets attacked, the other ones have to join in or whatever. But like, let's pretend like, I guess they already blocked the northern pipeline, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like, when is it supposed to get triggered? And would they actually like follow through with it? That's my kind of question for it. Like, who is NATO, and who is actually going to back up who?
Like, NATO's basically like an post-war allegiance of the Western Hemisphere militaries, but it's run by America.
Yeah,
that's what NATO is. It includes the rest of the Western Hemisphere, but it's the American military. You know what I mean? It's run by America. It's not sovereign. Like, as long as we're in NATO, as long as Europe's in NATO, it's not sovereign. Like, which is why I'm for something to replace the kind of European army or something, like, which is people, it's crazy. It's like, well, NATO is fucking crazy. What are you talking about? Like, but anyway, that's a whole different story. But that's what NATO is. And there are some crazy motherfuckers in there. Like, the people that orchestrated that pipeline sabotage, they're crazy. Like, they're mental. And they scare me. And I'm worried that they'll do something again like that before the card is called on Ukraine. I do think Russia will eventually win that, and Russia will eventually get their way there. partly just because it's literally next door to them, and they're more invested in it. But I
think it'll be like an issue where Russia, well, they've already right? They've already taken the parts they want. And I think it'll just be like Russia and their allies will say that it's like, that's Russia now. And other countries won't recognize that as theirs. And it will be a weird kind of, I don't know.
It'd be like one of those African countries where it's like the Somali pirates take over and like no one recognizes that it's
but like de facto
Somaliland, but no one recognizes that.
De facto, it'll be Putin's war goals have been achieved, probably with more losses than he would have liked.
Yeah.
But I think I'm hoping that's what I'm in a perverse way. I'm hoping that's what happens because it's been far too drawn out.
It's been far too long. Yeah, it's not. It's shitty for the Ukrainians.
I think that's probably, and this is weird because I thought I was very troubled by the glee of the punishment of the unvaxxed and anti-maskers and stuff during COVID. Yeah. But I actually found more disturbing was the glee at Russians and Ukrainians senselessly dying by pretty much everyone. I know that was the same for COVID, that pretty much everyone was in lockstep on this thing. But it was even more disturbing when it was just, thousands and thousands of young men dying every day and people were overjoyed by this. That was really disturbing to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, that invoked, at first it invoked a little bit of the kind of like Leninist instinct of like, these motherfucking oligarchs want to go kill us so they could, make a bunch of profit or something. We should kill them first. Because I had this image in my head of like, Poland or something being engulfed into this conflict, and then like, what am I like? Are people are people like me or what people I know expected to go fight, defend Poland from the Russians? And it just seems. I mean, like that's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. But like, I just thought like in a practical sense, not going to happen, but in a moral sense, I kind of imagined it, and I was like, I wonder what like people would think about that. I wonder if that would actually be an expectation we'd put on men today, treating men so badly for fucking so long, calling them toxic bigots, and giving them no fucking valuable place in society, and then going, oh yeah, do you want to like
that's another
get blown up by a drone? You want to do that?
Is I don't think the will to fight a war has been lower at any time in Western civilization.
Yeah, probably right.
Like I guess you have the combination of all native-born men of Western countries have been so derided that why would they have any allegiance to this system that hates them? And then number two, all the other young men of the right age aren't from that nation, so why would they fight for it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you just have this terrible situation, and it's like, let's be honest, this 21st century warfare. You've seen some of the clips of this war probably, and it's not a valiant war. It's just drones killing men.
It's horrible. Attacking you. Yeah.
It's not even dignified. As much as war can be dignified, you know what I mean? Like it's just it's just horrible.
They need to invent some like anti-drone weapons, like nets or something that you can shoot into the sky. It's just like, there used to be some sort of like anti-drone thing, because it's like these drones they're disgusting. Like you see these videos of these guys that are hiding in like a building, or under a fucking trench or something, and then his drone's just going following them, waiting, or even dropping grenades on them sometimes.
Well, this is the crazy thing. I only realized this because I saw there was a video that came out of China where they were showing their drone technology, and a lot of these drones, they literally are just like a cheap drone would you get from China, and it has a little latch where you put it's not like a special drone that has an explosive within it. You just take a normal grenade that you would throw, and it fits into this drone like a toy.
Yeah,
and then it can drop the grenade, or it can just fly into something and blow up the grenade, and it's like It's like Lego War. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, it's Lego War. It's Lego.
It's
Lego
for an
War.
idiot, right? Like I thought it was funny, you know, again, the Iraq War era when we was like, oh my God, they were using like Xbox 360 controllers to drive the tank and stuff. And you're like, oh man, the future's so cool. And then you got 2020s and we've got Lego drones killing people. It's horrible.
Right, it's fucking miserable. I think like if I was running a country, I would get a company, like a fucking military company, to like invent some sort of, I don't know, electromagnetic pulse drone destroyer, or maybe like a big net or something that you could like a shotgun net, you know, like so you see the drone in the sky and it goes and it just like wraps the drone in a net, you know, and just drags it. There's got to be something to like.
That sounds really good against one drone.
Well, like everyone has one. Everyone has one gun, and you got like 20 nets in the gun. So, you know?
Okay.
Because you see these guys, right? You see these videos of these guys, and they're getting drones, and there's like a group of them, and they're just like shooting at it, but like, you know, they can't really hit it because the bullets are small, and you need like a big object to like block it out, and you know, and they're just waiting, and they're like throwing their rucksacks at it, and they're throwing a fucking, you know, like a branch they found on like a tree branch they found on the ground. It's just like they have to give them something to be able to defend themselves against that. It's like going into war without a shield in the Bronze Age warfare, or you know, it's like you don't have a shield. It's like they just, okay, let's go and get stabbed by a spear. That's fun, you know. So I don't know, but like honestly, like the kind of gerontocratic, miserable, lifeless idiots that run the world today, I wouldn't break my toenail for them, you know. And I'm certainly not going into. I'm certainly not going in, and I also think that a lot of the Ukraine war stuff, at least on the Ukrainian side, is sending soldiers to fight, knowing there's no objective to actually, knowing that there's no way to win. Just because they want to keep up political appearances back home, you know, they want to keep up political appearances that like, oh yeah, we're still fighting. And,
this is the dark thing is, I think a lot of the money that has been sent to Ukraine is very clearly either been embezzled or is going to be embezzled, and it's actually elites or people high up in Ukrainian military government who are taking that money and just. They are mindlessly sending young men to die, basically, just so they can fight their problems. And it's
we're gonna hear all about this shit whenever the war ends. Within like the, you know, like when COVID ended, we heard all about this.
Oh yeah.
Not even, we probably haven't heard about half of it, but the half of it that does slip out, we hear about it. And the same thing will happen with Ukraine war, and that will be one of the things that you have like.
I haven't confronted anyone in my life directly on it yet, but it is amazing the number of people who I know personally who, you know, castigating me for not wearing a mask or saying about how people who aren't vax should be put in jail or whatever.
Yeah.
Like coming out, like making offhand comments about how they weren't always down with it, sort of thing.
Oh, like they're kind of retroactively going, yeah.
No, because the narrative's changed, and it makes you realize how many people you thought were like real people aren't. They're like they really are NPCs. They're just like part of the. They're not sentient people, and I don't know. I guess I know who I can't tell my secrets to now, I suppose.
Yeah, I got more respect for people that stick to their opinion, even if it was wrong.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. At least be honest about
COVID was terrible. We should have worn more masks. Even though I kind of think, are you fucking mental? Like, but at least you stuck to your opinion. Yeah.
So anyway, so the rest of the century. Any predictions for the rest of the century? Are we going to get to Mars? Do you think?
No. Actually, I'm glad you asked this question, right? Because no, we're not going to Mars. There's no point. There's just no fucking point. Musk, he might send a little robot to Mars or something, you know. But like he's not going to colonize Mars. That's bullshit. I would keep an eye out for like the brain chip stuff. I would keep an eye out for that. That sort of scares me.
Because that seems to me, that seems like you had the ubiquity of the internet, Then you've got the smartphone ubiquity of that, and the app technology that comes along with that. And it feels like the next step in the evolution of that. Like you had the crappy version with VR, but the next step is the Neuralink stuff, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not saying it's going to get like widespread use or anything, but like it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I think geopolitically multipolar world will still keep developing. The
and again, I think it'll be, like I said, it'll be very, very slow at first.
Yeah.
It'll be very slow development. I think like it'll be 100 years plus development.
Yeah, it's going to last a long time, but like I think it could, like as soon as Russia wins the Ukraine war, basically, it's going to sort of. I think it will accelerate a bit because that's the big kind of test for it, you know. That's
sure. I do think that America's still going to be the hegemon for at least 200 more years, though.
But not to the same level they were hegemon before.
100%. No, it's going to be a decline from here on out. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I also think that Europe. I like your reference earlier to Byzantium because I do think like if we analogize the Roman Empire with America, I do think that Europe is going to become a kind of Byzantine offshoot. It's still kind of part of it, but it's going to become more and more and more independent by necessity. I even think that the rulers in Europe know bloody well what happened with the pipeline, and
well, we also know from history, Europe could be the offshoot that becomes the based one.
Yeah.
This could happen. Like all the H-1B visa stuff could kick off in America. All the JEETs go there. And maybe Europe is the one that actually does the deportations and sees where that goes, for example. It could happen.
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I think Europe has an opportunity here to basically make itself more independent and, you know, and like culturally as well, not just politically. I think that might happen because I think that there's a lot of the European people, the kind of elites or the intelligentsia, whoever, you know, who quite rightly don't really trust Trump. That they shouldn't have trusted people before Trump. They absolutely shouldn't have, and I think they're stupid for that. But I think they're probably more realistic when it comes to Trump. Like I don't think Trump is quite, you know, in your face. You know, like for example, in Venezuela, back when he was running the first time, he was like, "We're gonna take your oil," and it's like, no, Trump, you're not allowed to say that. That's what we do, but you don't say that. And again, he does the same thing with Europe. Like he kind of just overtly talks about Europe like it's a colony. You know,
yeah.
And it's like I actually prefer that in some sense because it's more honest, and that might actually motivate people here to be more realistic about the relationship between America and Europe. So that might actually motivate what we're saying, a kind of separation. And I also think the populism as well, like it's kind of the kind of liberal technocratic model, post-war model, it did kind of work in the West in many ways, but if it like at least for a time period, and I think it did work for Europeans to some extent, and it worked for Americans to some extent, at least West Europeans. But populism then coming in at the end of that, like like American populism seems much more particular than European populism, if you get me. Like I feel like the post-liberal order politics for and culture for America and Europe will be more particular. I feel like it will be less sort of universalized into this glob.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, I misunderstood. When you said particular, I thought you meant particular as in it was leaning into ethnos and things like that. I think that it's fair to say that Europe generally has more of a rightist political tradition. And I actually think that America has a much more libertarian and inherently liberal ideology behind it. And I think that it becoming anything approximating totalitarianism or anything vaguely ethnically positive is definitely not an American thing. I think it's, you know, just looking at history and looking at culture, I think it's way more likely that Europe will go in a more explicitly rightist and ethnically centered direction politically. I think that's way more likely.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm not sure exactly how Europe will turn out, but I do think that it's going to be more distinct than it has been since the end of World War II. It's definitely going to be more distinct, in my opinion, anyway. Yeah. I also had a question as well. In the past, quarter of a century, who's been your favorite? This is a stupid question. But who's been your favorite, like, public figure, and who's been your least favorite?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Public figure.
If you could meet someone, like, for
Okay,
dinner.
well, here we go.
Yeah.
So my answer, because it's political but also cultural, I think my favorite public figure, and definitely someone I want to meet the most, is 100% Kanye West.
Okay.
No question whatsoever. He is undoubtedly the most interesting person of the 21st century so far.
Okay.
No doubt. My second place would obviously, I think, would be Trump. It's quite obvious, right? But Kanye West is easily, like, he's kind of a bit of everything that's happened,
Fair. And, like, if you could punch someone from the 21st public figure, if you could just fucking punch someone, who would you punch?
Yeah, I guess we spoke about maybe Lex Friedman or Sam Harris, maybe.
Actually, Sam Harris is a good answer.
Lex Friedman's, I don't know, he doesn't really know what he does, but Sam Harris is smart enough to know what he's doing, so he deserves a bit of a punch.
That's a good answer, Sam Harris.
But yeah, least favorite. I'm suffering from recency bias, but I really hate Keir Starmer.
Yeah, he's bad.
He's a weasel, man.
Also,
but yeah, definitely recency bias on that one.
Also, Trudeau has recently resigned, so that shows you something. But he's another. He would be up there on the list of people that I would like.
Oh yeah, but I guess he's even worse because he's got, like, pretty boy thing going on as well.
He's just, like, I don't really see much of, obviously, because I'm not fucking Canadian. I don't really see, like, I know about Trudeau, but I don't encounter him very much. And today I was watching a clip of his resignation speech, and he's an insufferable person. Just the way he speaks. I've never heard someone speak, like, so dishonestly, And I'm not talking about, like, what he's saying. I'm saying it's just this tone. It's like, oh, it's just almost like the way he's speaking, his tone is just so, like, it's just everything's. I don't know. It's just revolting. He's just a fucking horrible person,
Yeah. What about you? Who's your favorite public figure then?
I would like to meet Julian Assange because I think he has really fucking suffered for a cause. He's one of the few people who I would say, like, genuinely, like, put his money where his mouth is, and he really kind of.
Hey, can't he put his money where his mouth is?
Yeah, fair enough, but he hasn't been fucking in jail for, like, 10 years.
I know. He's been in a mental jail.
He's been in his own spiritual jail. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Assange. Is there anyone else I'd like to meet? I mean, there's, like, philosophers that are still living that I'd like to meet, but I suppose it's not really. It's kind of more for my own personal reasons. But let me think. Is there any politician or public figure, actor? No, I can't really think of anyone. Assange. Do you know who I'd like to meet, actually? The dude on January 6th, the Viking dude.
He's done it. He's done interviews on podcasts and stuff. You can definitely find him.
Did he do jail time? Do you know?
I think he did.
Yeah. See, all my favorite people have done jail time. You have to do jail time for you to be my favorite person.
Good point.
I just like that guy. I just thought he just had the spirit. He had a kind of spirit that should lead us in the next. I probably don't agree with him on everything, but, like, he's just his light-hearted but ambitious spirit, I think, is what we need.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we have, like, political figures and we have cultural figures. I think what's missing from, like we said, this very special and exceptional slice of human time is we've lost mystical figures. The last one
kind
I
of
can think of is
spiritual
maybe
leaders.
Aleister Crowley. Maybe it's maybe the last one I can think of that was
Yeah.
prominent
What
enough.
about Peterson? He's a bit of a kind of.
He's not. He's not like. I mean, like, because here we go. Because I was asked before, like, who's my favorite mystic, and I said Kanye West, because I think he is kind of him and like you said, like the January 6th shaman guy. They're like kind of like witch doctory kind of. They're kind of seeing things that you can't see, and they're spiritual characters. Pearson's not quite a witch doctor.
No, but he does deal with spiritual issues or psychological issues, which, in my opinion, are basically just spiritual issues, right? I mean, at least in the more serious cases, I think in like I'm burned out because I work too much. Okay, that's just a psychological issue, but like people suffering from like the meaning crisis or whatever, right? I think that Peterson is definitely taking up a spiritual role, giving people meaning.
Well, I totally agree, but I think the role of the mystic is different from a spiritual role.
Okay, fair,
yeah. Peterson's still that paternal figure that grounds you. The mystic figure is actually to unground you and put you in new situations that you wouldn't be aware of. And actually, this is interestingly because I'm a Peterson sympathizer. I think that he may probably help my development a lot in like 2016 to 2018 when he was coming up, sort of thing. Like it definitely kind of helped me ground some of what I was trying to do with my life. But now, years and years later and moving forward, his biggest weakness, which has become evident, is that, again, coming back to what we're talking about, he is a liberal, and he ultimately really, 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 when push comes to shove, supports the current regime.
Yeah, fair.
Really supports it. Yeah. That's actually the base of everything he talks about. It's not Christianity; it's that he supports the current regime. Ultimately.
Yeah, fair. It's annoying because sometimes some people come up and they're kind of, they're critiquing the wokeness, but then they're sort of just because I feel like you can kind of polemicize against the kind of woke stage of liberalism, and then from that polemic you can sort of emerge into something higher, or you can sort of polemicize against it and then like a return to a kind of whatever like 90s or even 50s kind of liberalism. Which, look, fair enough. I mean, those times were better than the times we're in now, I think probably objectively, but it's just not going to happen. Like, I just don't think, it's not going to, it's not practical. And also it doesn't do the task of seeing how one thing led to the other. It sort of just sees.
I mean, to have that sort of prosperity, you need to have that post-war moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That needs to happen. That would need to happen again, but it doesn't. You don't have the same demographics. You don't have the same anything going on. It's a completely different world. So,
yeah, no, you're right. Like it's stupid, but I do feel like Peters. I think he was an important person in the 21st century. I do feel like he genuinely did get some people and like stop them going, I don't know, completely haywire or something. A lot of people kind of found him as a grounding force, which is important. I even had someone write to me one time because on my blog I wrote about something to do with Peterson. And they said, I won't go into details because it's kind of personal, but like the person's going to tell me something kind of personal about themselves. But they basically told me that like, the Peterson really, really helped them at like a time when they were really at the fucking edge, And so that's important. I think I give Peterson some credit for that as well. But I do agree with you talking about these kind of shaman people who kind of who don't ground you but open you, and I do think that's important because like we do need an opening today. Like the rest of the century, we need like a kind of vision or a kind of something to pull us forward. To kind of motivate.
What I find interesting about it is, and this kind of vindicates my feeling that this is a necessary thing, is that although our current culture did reject and continues to reject the idea of the need for mystical shamanic figures, they pop up anyway, and they have an influence anyway. So that power is still undulating underneath, even if the society doesn't want to accept it, which I find very interesting.
No, that's 100%. And I was even reading a book about Peter the Hermit recently, who like he basically led the first crusade, and he used to like travel on a donkey, and he would go around towns like recruiting people for the crusade. And he wasn't a mystic because his Christians don't accept that, but like he kind of operated almost as a mystic. And there was moments where there was quasi mystical things happening. So for example, one time when they were going on their way to Jerusalem, they decided a duck or a goose had the Holy Spirit in the goose, and they followed the goose for like for I don't know how long, a few kilometers or a few miles. So there's kind of these kind of absurd figures who are a little bit mystical. That like I do feel like they do emerge when we need a vision, you know, like when we don't know what to do with the future, we don't know where to go. We don't know what the means, the ends of things are, and we kind of need that kind of absurdity, which I'm open to. I think that's kind of cool. The other question I want to have you is like the role of the philosopher in the rest of the century. What do you think?
Well, and this is something we didn't mention despite the technological stuff, is where so-called AI is going. Now, I mean, I have an issue with it being called AI because it's not AI, it's a language model, and that's very different. But what it has already done, and I think this is kind of the ceiling for what we currently call AI in a lot of ways. There's technical reasons for this I can go into if that's interesting, but I think it would be kind of boring for people. But basically what's happened is a lot of knowledge work has been made unnecessary overnight, pretty much. Like you can now write legal documents with AI that's just as good as standard, up to a standard that a college-educated person could write. You can write news articles that a college-educated journalist could write. What it doesn't do is it doesn't really have creativity. So you can generate a novel based off a previous idea, but it's not really going to have its own unique idea, at least not in the way a human would have. It might be able to generate ideas based on like types, but it doesn't, it's not, this is one of the reasons I have an issue with it being called intelligence, because it's not really intelligence like that. But why is this important for philosophy? Is that, well, I think we're living in a hyper philosophical time because of technology. Like you could like someone like people like Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, right? They are dealing with the existential problems of life, and frankly going mad because of it, because them realizing that, oh, every little thing I do is important to ethics or whatever, or the meaning of life. But now you're realizing that not only is your own existential philosophical subject watching what you're doing, now there are technological entities which are observing what you're doing as well. So we are in a hyper existential time for philosophy. Like everything is in a weird hyper reality in terms of things being observed and data being collected. So that all the questions that apply to a philosophical subject apply many times over, and possibly also apply to these other identities other entities as well. But what I'm saying is that also that low level philosophical like training, like tutoring, and education is kind of made obsolete by the fact that kind of degree educated knowledge production can be done by this language model. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, sort of. I agree with the kind of existential, kind of emphasis on the existential input of our time. I also do think that obviously there's the kind of technologies that sort of, like for example wiring a brain or biotechnology, that are going to make us have to think about the human nature again, like things that basically sort of, I do think human nature is quite flexible, but I kind of see it like a band. Like you can flex human nature, you can pull it, but it does eventually sort of resist and want to go back, or snap even. And I think conservatives are a bit wrong when they kind of say, "Oh, human nature is this rigid thing." Well, it's not really rigid. Like there's a kind of bandy substance to it, in my opinion. But like, if you go like wiring your brain, or like even some of the ways we live now with like dating apps or something, I think like it sort of stretches things so far that like you just get this sort of tension, basically a tension point, and then from the tension point you might have a kind of snap or a kind of pullback or something. And I definitely think we're at that time. And I think when you have those kind of tension points, uh, philosophy starts to become important, because philosophy is partially an enormous inquiry into human nature, right? So the sort of the sort of ends of it, the limits of it, the structures of it, and so on and so forth. And I think that once you have, and I think that's one of the reasons also why philosophy is going to continue to be more and more important, because exactly because the kind of ways of life or the technology have stretched us too far.
Yeah. No, I think I agree. I definitely agree with the fact that human nature is elastic, and I think that's borne out by the fact that findings in neuroscience, like our brains are plastic as well. Our brains are elastic, and you can train and untrain and retrain your brain to reward certain feedback loops. And the same goes for your body. Like you can exercise and get slimmer, or you can lift weights and get stronger. And one thing I think, this is something I'm writing about a lot now, is that we have this body which is, its goal is homeostasis. Its goal is to keep temperature and endorphins and liquid levels and electrolyte levels. Its goal is to keep those all in homeostasis. But we have this human intellect connected to it that has a enjoyment of the extremes as well. It likes to feel lots of endorphins. It likes to have a lot of salt in the body for some reason. And I'm hoping one thing that things like connecting to the brainstem with technology will hopefully, I hope it will destroy about our current view from a philosophical perspective, is the quite antiquated view on the hard problem that the mind and body are separate things. I think it's a much more continuous system than we like to admit as philosophers.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
I think the CNS and the brain are inextricably linked in ways that we don't really like. We're starting to realize that, changes in someone's stomach biome affect the way their brain works. And that's something that doesn't with it, when there's a mind-body disconnection in your conceptual framework, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, do you know all these like mysterious like chronic illnesses and like whatever drop in fertility and all the stuff that's or even drop in life expectancy and stuff which has happened in the past, particularly in the past 10 years, and there isn't really yet a concrete answer for any of this stuff. Like what's causing it? Is it microplastics? Is it and like I've always thought maybe it could actually just be exactly what you're talking about. Like it's like just a response to various changes in the way we live with the internet or social interaction or
that's it.
I don't know, like possibly like I'm not saying totally that. I mean, it's probably a number of factors, but like that's definitely one factor which hasn't been explored enough yet, because it doesn't fit a kind of mechanical understanding. It's more of a kind of environmental conditioning affecting the brain and then the nervous system and all that. It's more environmental. So
because like I've said, we're starting to observe the connection in the other direction. But you're right, I haven't thought about the connection the other way. The fact that the way your brain is operating and the thoughts that you're thinking could actually be affecting how your CNS and the rest of your body are doing its thing as well. It's possible. It's very possible. So I guess to give a positive spin on what we've been talking about, that's what I hope will happen to biological perspectives, but also from philosophy, I guess.